Before we begin, I need to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. We've all witnessed moments like this. When someone with power thinks they can humiliate another person without consequences. Maybe you've stayed silent. Maybe you've looked away. Maybe you've even laughed along. But what happened in that Chicago restaurant on that autumn evening changed everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why staying silent is no longer an option. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will either inspire you or haunt you. The crystal chandeliers of Palazzo Nero caught the October light differently at 7:30 in the evening. Zara Williams had learned this in her 3 years working there. The way the setting sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the baccarat crystals into prisms that scattered fragments of gold and amber across the Italian marble floors. It was the golden hour. That perfect moment when the restaurant transformed from an upscale dining establishment into something almost magical. Something that made even the most jaded Chicago socialites pause mid-conversation to admire the spectacle. But Zara wasn't watching the light show tonight. She was focused on table 7 VIP section, where Nico Santoro sat like a king holding court. 6 men surrounded him, all in expensive suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent, all wearing the kind of watches that required insurance policies, all laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny. But when Nico Santoro laughed, everyone laughed. That's just how power worked. Zara knew who he was, of course. Everyone in Chicago knew who Nico Santoro was, even if the knowledge came wrapped in euphemisms and careful language. Business consultant, the newspapers called him. Entrepreneur, said the society pages. But the staff at Palazzo Nero, they knew better. They knew the difference between old money and new power, between inherited wealth and the kind of influence that came from controlling things people needed and couldn't get anywhere else. She adjusted the collar of her crisp white shirt, smoothed down her black vest, and picked up the 2015 Burlo she'd selected for their table. Her hands were steady, they were always steady when she worked. That steadiness had taken years to cultivate, years of pushing down every tremor of doubt, every shake of uncertainty, every quiver of rage that threatened to surface when someone looked through her instead of at her. Table 7, she murmured to herself, a tiny prayer, a small affirmation. Just another table. But it wasn't just another table, and they both knew it. Zara's heels clicked against the marble with a rhythm that had become second nature. Confident, purposeful, unhurried. She'd spent her 20s perfecting that walk, the one that said I belong here even when every fiber of her being whispered that she didn't, that she never would, that she was fooling herself by even trying. The memories always came at moments like this, unbidden and unwelcome. 8 years old, standing in the principal's office, listening to Mrs. Henderson explain why she couldn't be in the advanced reading program. It's not that you're not capable, dear. It's just that, well, sometimes children from your background need more time to adjust to rigorous academic standards. 14 years old, watching her mother work 3 jobs to keep them in their South Side apartment, coming home at midnight smelling of cleaning chemicals and other people's lives, too tired to eat the dinner Zara had kept warm for her. 22 years old, fresh out of culinary school with a degree in hospitality management and a specialization in viticulture, being told by her 6th interviewer that they were going in a different direction, while they hired a white guy with half her qualifications 2 weeks later. Zara shook her head slightly, banishing the ghosts. That was then. This was now. She was the head sommelier at one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants. She'd earned this position through sheer determination, countless hours of study, and a palate that could detect the subtle difference between a Burgundy from Geoffrey Chambertin and one from Chambol Musigny at 20 paces. She'd earned this. She belonged here. She repeated it like a mantra as she approached table 7. Good evening, gentlemen, Zara said, her voice carrying the perfect note of professional warmth, friendly but not familiar, attentive but not subservient. I've selected a 2015 Barolo for your table this evening. The Giacomo Conterno, from the Casina Francia vineyard. It's a magnificent expression of Nebbiolo, with notes of. We didn't ask for a lecture, Nico Santoro interrupted, not even looking up from his phone. His voice was flat, dismissive, the verbal equivalent of swatting away a fly. The men around the table shifted in their seats. One of them, a younger guy with slicked back hair and a nervous energy, shot Zara an apologetic glance. The others suddenly found their water glasses fascinating. Zara felt the familiar clench in her stomach, That old sensation of being rendered invisible, of being reduced to less than human. But she maintained her composure, her smile never wavering. Of course, sir. I'll just. Do you even understand the difference between good wine and cheap booze? Nico finally looked up, his dark eyes scanning her with the kind of casual contempt reserved for things beneath notice. Or are you just here to serve it? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun. For a moment, just a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The ambient noise of clinking silverware and murmured conversations faded into white noise. The golden light from the chandelier suddenly felt harsh, exposing. Zara's mind raced through her options with the speed of survival instinct. She could laugh it off, pretend she didn't understand the insult embedded in the question. She could apologize for what she didn't know, but she could apologize anyway. She could simply walk away, ask another sommelier to handle this table, preserve her dignity through retreat. But something was different tonight. Maybe it was the way Nico had said serve it, loading those two words with centuries of degradation. Maybe it was the way his men were carefully not looking at her, their discomfort a silent acknowledgement of the cruelty they were witnessing. Maybe it was just that Zara Williams had spent 32 years swallowing her words, and her throat was finally full. The younger Zara flashed through her mind again. 10 years old this time, standing in the playground while Madison Cooper called her a name that started with N and ended with her childhood. She'd gone home crying that day. Asked her mother why people were so mean, why they hated her without even knowing her. Her mother had dried her tears and said something Zara had never forgotten. Baby girl, the world's gonna try to make you small. It's gonna try to convince you that you don't matter, that you should just accept whatever scraps they throw your way. But you listen to me, you are not small. You are not invisible. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you get to decide who you're gonna be. The moment had come. I understand perfectly, Mr. Santoro, Zara said, her voice clear and steady. She set the wine bottle down on the table with deliberate care, then straightened to her full height. But you see, I didn't get to where I am today by being a good servant. I got here by knowing far more about this wine than most people in this room ever will. If you believe people like Zara deserve to have their stories told, hit that subscribe button right now. We share real stories about courage, transformation, and standing up for what's right. Don't miss what happens next because Nico's response will leave you speechless. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Nico's eyebrows rose slightly. Around the table, his men had gone very still. Zara wasn't done. And if you're asking me about cheap booze, then I suggest you remember that most people who run the world never sit at tables like this. They sit in rooms you'll never be invited to. They drink wines you've never heard of. In places where your money and your. She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the table, taking in the expensive suits and hollow eyes. Your particular brand of influence means absolutely nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in the kitchen a pan clattered. The sound seemed to come from another universe. Zara picked up the wine bottle again, her hand still perfectly steady. Now, would you like me to pour the Barolo? Or would you prefer to continue this fascinating conversation about the nature of service and knowledge? For 5 seconds, 5 impossibly long seconds, Nico Santoro just stared at her. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone that gave away nothing. Then slowly, very slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. But it wasn't a smile. Not really. It was something more dangerous, the expression of a predator who just spotted something interesting in the tall grass, something that might actually provide a challenge before it got consumed. Pour the wine, Nico said quietly. Zara did, performing the ritual with the practiced grace of a maestro, presenting the label, opening the bottle with a soft pop, pouring a taste for Nico first. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. She was a professional, and she would execute her duties with excellence, regardless of the circumstances. Nico swirled the wine, sniffed it, took a small sip. He said nothing, just nodded. Zara proceeded to pour for the rest of the table, moving with efficiency and grace, as if nothing unusual had just transpired. But as she turned to leave, Nico spoke again, his voice carrying just far enough for her to hear. Interesting choice. The contorno. Very bold. Zara didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge she'd heard him. She simply walked away, her head high, her stride confident, her heart hammering so hard against her ribs she thought it might crack them. She made it to the service station before her hands started to shake. "Holy shit," whispered Marco, the assistant sommelier, appearing at her elbow like a ghost. "Holy shit, Zara. Did you actually?" "Not now," Zara cut him off, busying herself with reorganizing wine glasses that didn't need reorganizing. "I have other tables." "But not now." Marco retreated, but Zara could feel his eyes on her, could feel everyone's eyes on her. The whispers were starting, spreading through the restaurant staff like wildfire. By morning, everyone in Chicago's high-end restaurant scene would know that the sommelier at Palazzo Nero had talked back to Nico Santoro. By morning, Zara's life might be over. She pushed the thought away and focused on her next table. Table 12 anniversary couple, looking for something special. She could do this. She would do this. She was Zara Williams, head sommelier at Palazzo Nero, and she would not let fear dictate her actions, even if that fear was absolutely justified. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of wine pairings and polite conversation. Zara moved through her duties with mechanical precision, her mind only half present, the other half replaying those terrible, glorious moments at table 7 over and over again. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Santoro." Had she really said that? Had she really challenged one of the most powerful men in Chicago to his face, in front of his associates, in a room full of witnesses? Yes, she had. And she couldn't decide if it was the bravest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. By 11 o'clock, the restaurant had cleared out. Table 7 had left around 10:30, Nico Santoro departing without another glance in Zara's direction. She'd watched them go from behind the bar, her stomach a knot of anxiety and adrenaline, half expecting some kind of confrontation, some consequence. But they'd simply left, tipping generously, too generously actually, which somehow felt more ominous than if they'd stiffed the restaurant entirely. "Zara." Vincent Moretti's voice cut through her thoughts. The restaurant manager stood in the doorway of his office, his expression grave. "A word. Here it comes," Zara thought. "Here's where I get fired, where I get blacklisted, where I learn that standing up for yourself has consequences that can't be undone." She followed Vincent into his office, a cramped space that smelled of espresso and expensive cologne. He closed the door behind her, a gesture that felt uncomfortably final. Vincent was in his 50s, a Chicago native who'd worked his way up from busboy to manager over 3 decades. He was fair, competent, and absolutely terrified of Nico Santoro, as anyone with a functioning survival instinct should be. "Sit down," Vincent said, not unkindly. Zara sat, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. She would not apologize. She would not grovel. If this was the end, she would face it with dignity. Vincent sank into his chair with a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking," Zara said carefully, "that I deserve to be treated with respect." "Respect?" Vincent's laugh was bitter. "Zara, you're one of the best sommeliers I've ever worked with. Your knowledge is exceptional, your taste is impeccable, and your service is always professional. I respect the hell out of you. But Nico Santoro doesn't care about any of that." Vincent leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Do you know what that man is capable of? Do you have any idea what you've just done? I stood up for myself. You painted a target on your back." Vincent's voice rose, then fell again as he caught himself. "Look, I get it. What he said was out of line. It was racist, it was demeaning, and if we lived in a fair world you'd be applauded for putting him in his place. But we don't live in a fair world, Zara. We live in Chicago, and in Chicago men like Nico Santoro don't get challenged. They get obeyed." Zara felt something cold settle in her chest. "Are you firing me?" "What? No. No, of course not." Vincent ran his hand through his thinning hair. "But I need you to understand the situation you're in. Santoro's been coming here for 5 years. He brings business, lots of business. His associates, his partners, his friends. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in revenue every month. So I'm supposed to accept being humiliated because he's a good customer? I'm not saying that. I'm just..." Vincent trailed off, seeming to deflate. "I'm trying to protect you. I've seen what happens to people who cross Santoro. Sometimes they lose their jobs. Sometimes they lose their businesses. Sometimes. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Zara stood up, suddenly exhausted. Thank you for the warning, Vincent. Is there anything else? Vincent looked at her for a long moment, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. You're not going to apologize, are you? No. Not even if I asked you to? Especially not if you asked me to. Vincent nodded slowly. Then be careful, Zara. Be very, very careful. Watch your back, watch your car, watch everything. And if anything strange happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. Understood. Understood. Zara left the office feeling numb. She changed out of her work clothes in the staff locker room, pulling on jeans and a sweater, transforming from sommelier back into regular person. But she didn't feel regular. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath her feet. The October night was cold when she stepped outside, the wind whipping off Lake Michigan with a bite that promised an early winter. Zara pulled her jacket tighter and walked to the employee parking lot, her senses on high alert, Vincent's warnings echoing in her mind. Her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had seen better days, sat alone under a flickering streetlight. She'd bought it used 3 years ago, paying in cash saved up from tips and careful budgeting. It wasn't much, but it was hers, earned through her own effort. She approached it cautiously, half expecting. What? A bomb? That seemed dramatic even for a mafia boss. But maybe slash tires or a threatening note or... The car was fine. Completely, utterly normal. Zara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and unlocked the door. Maybe Vincent was being paranoid. Maybe Nico Santoro had already forgotten the whole incident, moved on to more important concerns than one uppity sommelier. Maybe. She drove home through Chicago's late-night streets, past neighborhoods that shifted from affluent to working class to somewhere in between. Her apartment was in Pilsen, a historically Latino neighborhood that had been slowly gentrifying over the past decade. She'd found a rent-controlled unit through a friend of a friend, a tiny one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had probably been beautiful once, back when Chicago was still becoming Chicago. The apartment was dark when she entered, just as she'd left it that morning. She locked the door behind her, deadbolt, chain, doorknob, and finally allowed herself to collapse onto her second-hand couch. The adrenaline that had been sustaining her all evening suddenly evaporated, leaving her feeling hollowed out and shaky. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over her mother's contact. It was late, but her mom was a night owl, usually awake until at least 1 in the morning. The phone rang 3 times before her mother's voice came through, warm and familiar. Baby girl? It's late. Everything okay? And just like that, just hearing her mother's voice, Zara felt the tears come. Not sobs, she wouldn't allow herself that, but silent tears that slid down her cheeks and dropped onto her hands. Mama, she whispered. I think I did something really stupid. Tell me. So Zara did. She told her mother everything. The insult, her response, Vincent's warning, the fear that now sat in her stomach like a stone. Her mother listened without interrupting, the way she always had, the way she'd listened to every childhood hurt and adolescent heartbreak and adult crisis. When Zara finished, there was a long pause. Then her mother spoke, her voice gentle but firm. Do you remember what I told you when you were 10? When Madison Cooper called you that name. You said the world would try to make me small. And what else did I say? Zara closed her eyes, picturing her younger self in her mother's arms, feeling safe even though the world outside was cruel. You said when the moment comes, I get to decide who I'm gonna be. That's right. And baby girl, you decided. You decided you're not the kind of woman who accepts disrespect. Not from anyone, not for any reason. Now, was it dangerous? Yes. Could there be consequences? Absolutely. But you can't undo it. And I wouldn't want you to even if you could. But Mama, I know who he is. I read the papers. I watched the news. And I know my daughter is not a fool. You understood the risk when you opened your mouth and you did it anyway. That's courage, Zara. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. Zara wiped her eyes, feeling something loosen in her chest. I'm scared. I know, baby. I'm scared for you too. But I'm also proud. So damn proud I could burst. They talked for another hour about nothing and everything. the way mothers and daughters do when comfort is needed more than solutions. By the time Zara hung up, it was past midnight, and exhaustion had finally caught up with her. She fell asleep on the couch, still in her jeans, her phone clutched in her hand. The next 2 weeks passed in a state of heightened anxiety. Zara went to work every day expecting catastrophe, but catastrophe didn't come. Instead, something subtler and more insidious began to happen. Her shifts started changing. She'd arrived to find herself scheduled for the slow Tuesday lunch service instead of the lucrative Friday dinner crowd. Her section of tables shrank, given to other sommeliers without explanation. When she asked Vincent about it, he avoided her eyes and muttered something about restructuring. The other staff members treated her differently too. Some with admiration. Marco had started calling her the badass when management wasn't around, but most with a wary distance, as if her defiance might be contagious, or worse, as if standing too close to her might make them targets too. Zara understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. The worst part was the silence from table 7. Nico Santoro didn't return to Palazzo Nero. His associates didn't come either. It was as if the restaurant had been put on some invisible blacklist, a subtle warning that the Santoro favor had been withdrawn. Vincent's stress became palpable. He started drinking more, staying later, snapping at staff members over minor infractions. The restaurant's revenue dipped. Not dramatically. Palazzo Nero had plenty of wealthy patrons, but enough to notice, enough to worry about. And everyone knew whose fault it was. "You need to fix this," Vincent told her one evening, cornering her in the wine cellar. "Call him. Apologize. Something." "No. Zara, please. The owners are asking questions. They're looking at the numbers. If this continues, then it continues. I'm not apologizing for defending myself. Your pride is going to cost people their jobs." That one hurt because it was true. If Palazzo Nero lost enough business, there would be layoffs. Marco, who had student loans to pay. Teresa, the hostess, who was saving for her daughter's college fund. Giuseppe, the line cook, who sent money back to his family in Sicily. But even knowing that, even feeling the weight of responsibility for their livelihoods, Zara couldn't bring herself to do what Vincent was asking. Because if she apologized now, if she bent the knee and admitted that power trumped dignity, then what had it all been for? What was the point of standing up if you were just going to lie back down the moment things got difficult? She told Vincent no, and she meant it. That night, Zara walked to her car alone like always. The parking lot was darker than usual. One of the streetlights had burned out, and apparently, nobody had gotten around to replacing it yet. She was fumbling for her keys when she heard footsteps behind her. Zara spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting. "Easy," said a familiar voice. "It's just me." The younger guy from table 7 stepped into the dim light, his hands raised in a peaceable gesture. Up close, he looked even younger than Zara had thought. Maybe late 20s, with nervous eyes and the kind of expensive haircut that screamed trying too hard. "What do you want?" Zara's voice was steadier than she felt. Her hand moved to her purse where she kept pepper spray. "Chicago Girl 101. Just to talk. My name's Luca. I work for Mr. Santoro." "I figured." Luca shifted uncomfortably. "Look what you did that night, that took guts. Real guts. And I think you should know that Mr. Santoro, he was impressed." "Impressed?" Zara's tone was flat. "Is that why he's been blacklisting the restaurant?" "He's not okay, yeah, he has been. But it's not personal. It's just business. He can't let people see someone challenge him without consequences. You understand? What I understand is that I'm being punished for refusing to be disrespected. You're being punished for embarrassing him in front of his people. There's a difference." Luca glanced around nervously, as if worried about being overheard. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because Mr. Santoro wants to meet with you." Zara's blood ran cold. "Absolutely not. Hear me out. He wants to offer you a position. A real position, not just sommelier work. He's opening a new restaurant, high-end, upscale, the works. He wants someone who knows wine. Someone who's not afraid to speak their mind. He wants you." "You're joking." "I'm completely serious. The pay would be triple what you're making now, plus equity in the business. You'd have full control over the wine program, full authority to make decisions. It's a hell of an opportunity." Zara stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. Nico Santoro, the man who'd insulted her, who'd been destroying her livelihood through subtle economic warfare, wanted to give her a job? Why? She asked finally. Luca smiled, and for the first time he looked genuinely amused. Because you're the only person in 5 years who's had the balls to talk back to him. He respects that. He wants people around him who aren't yes men, who'll tell him the truth even when it's uncomfortable. He has a funny way of showing respect. Look, I'm not going to pretend Mr. Santoro is a saint. He's not. But he's fair in his own way. You proved yourself to him that night. Now he's giving you a chance to prove yourself again. Zara felt like she was in a surreal dream, the kind where the logic doesn't quite track but you go along with it anyway because what else can you do? And if I say no? Luca's expression turned serious. Then nothing changes. The restaurant stays on the shit list, your boss keeps panicking, and eventually you probably lose your job when Palazzo Nero can't sustain the losses. Or maybe you keep your job, but spend the rest of your career wondering what could have been. That sounds like a threat. It's reality. I'm not threatening you, Zara. I'm laying out your options. Meet with him, hear what he has to say. If you don't like it, you walk away. No pressure, no consequences. Somehow I doubt that. Luca pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out. His personal number. Call it when you're ready to talk. Or don't. Your choice. Zara didn't take the card immediately. She looked at it, looked at Luca, looked at her beat-up Honda Civic that barely ran half the time. She thought about Vincent's stress, about Marco's student loans, about her mother working 3 jobs. She thought about the price of principles in a world where power always won. Finally, she took the card. I'm not promising anything. Understood. Luca nodded, then started to walk away. He paused after a few steps, looking back over his shoulder. For what it's worth. What you said that night. About people who run the world sitting in rooms we'll never be invited to? That hit him harder than you know. Nobody talks to him like that. Nobody even thinks like that. He hasn't been able to stop thinking about it. Then Luca was gone, disappearing into the Chicago night, leaving Zara alone in the parking lot with a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before starting the engine, staring at the card, at the phone number written in elegant script. One phone call. That's all it would take. One conversation with the devil and maybe everything could change. But what would it cost her? More importantly, what would it cost her to refuse? Zara didn't call the number that night. Or the next night. Or the night after that. She went to work, did her job, and tried to pretend that the business card burning a hole in her purse didn't exist. But it did exist, and its presence haunted her like a ghost, whispering possibilities she didn't want to consider. 3 days after her encounter with Luca, Vincent pulled her aside again. This time, his expression wasn't just worried, it was devastated. The owners called a meeting, he said quietly. They're talking about letting staff go. Probably starting with the sommeliers since that's where the incident originated. Zara felt her stomach drop. Marco, probably you, maybe me too. They're looking for someone to blame, and we're the obvious targets. But it's not fair. Fair. Vincent laughed bitterly. Zara, you keep using that word like it means something. This is business. Fair doesn't enter into it. That night, Zara sat in her apartment, Nico Santoro's business card on her coffee table, her phone beside it. She'd been staring at both for an hour, paralyzed by indecision. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. You get to decide who you're gonna be. But who was she? Was she the woman who stood on principle no matter the cost? Or was she the woman who made practical decisions, who understood that surviving in the real world sometimes meant compromising your ideals? She picked up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring a voice answered. Smooth, cultured, unmistakably Nico Santoro. I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. Zara's mouth went dry. How did you know it was you? Luca told me he gave you this number. It's not like I give it out to many people. So Zara Williams, sommelier extraordinaire. To what do I owe the pleasure? You know why I'm calling. I do. But I want to hear you say it. Zara closed her eyes, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. I want to hear about this job opportunity. No commitments, just information. Smart woman. There's a cafe on West Randolph, La Petite Pause. Meet me there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Come alone. How do I know? How do you know I won't hurt you? You don't. But consider this, if I wanted to hurt you, I could have done it already. I don't need to lure you to a public cafe to make that happen. This is business, Zara. Just business. He hung up before she could respond. Zara set down her phone, her hands shaking. She just agreed to meet with a mob boss. A man who could destroy her with a phone call. Who'd already been destroying her through economic pressure. Who'd insulted her in the most racist terms imaginable. What the hell was she doing? But deep down she knew. She was doing what people do when they're cornered, when the choices narrow down to bad and worse. She was trying to survive. La Petite Pause was the kind of cafe that catered to people who had never worried about money a day in their lives. Everything was artfully rustic. Exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood furniture, baristas who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The coffee cost $8 for a small, and that was before you added any fancy milk alternatives. Zara arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, wearing her most professional outfit, a navy blazer over a white blouse, dark jeans, minimal jewelry. She wanted to look put together but not like she was trying too hard. Nico Santoro was already there, sitting at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. He was dressed more casually than he'd been at the restaurant. Expensive but understated, charcoal sweater over dark pants. Without his entourage, he looked almost normal, just another wealthy Chicagoan enjoying an afternoon coffee. But Zara knew better. Normal men didn't have Luca standing near the door, trying to look inconspicuous. Normal men didn't make everyone in the cafe subtly uncomfortable without saying a word. Ms. Williams. Nico stood as she approached, an old-world gesture that felt oddly formal. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Zara sat, her posture rigid, her guard up. Let's skip the pleasantries. You have a job offer. I want to hear it. Nico's mouth twitched, amusement or annoyance she couldn't tell. Direct. I appreciate that. Would you like something to drink first? No. Suit yourself. Nico took a sip of his espresso, taking his time, establishing that this conversation would proceed at his pace, not hers. I'm opening a restaurant. Not just any restaurant, the restaurant. It'll be the finest dining establishment in Chicago, possibly in the Midwest. Money is no object. The chef is Michelin-starred. The interior designer has done work for 11 Madison Park. And the wine program. He paused meaningfully. The wine program needs someone exceptional. You have plenty of sommeliers to choose from. I do. But I don't want plenty. I want you. Why? Nico leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Because you understand something most people don't. You understand that taste isn't just about flavor. It's about knowledge, context, history. When you presented that Barolo, you weren't just serving wine. You were making a statement about terroir, about craftsmanship, about the difference between consuming and appreciating. Zara said nothing, waiting for him to continue. And because Nico's voice dropped lower, you're the only person in 5 years who's told me the truth to my face. Do you know how rare that is? Everyone around me is either terrified or trying to manipulate me. They tell me what they think I want to hear. But you? You told me what I needed to hear. Even knowing it could cost you everything. It is costing me everything. Which is why I'm offering you this opportunity. Come work for me. Full creative control over the wine program. Salary of $200,000 a year, plus benefits, plus profit sharing. You'll have a staff, a budget, and the freedom to build something extraordinary. The number hit Zara like a physical blow. $200,000. That was more than triple her current salary. That was enough to pay off her student loans in a year. That was enough to help her mother finally retire from those 3 jobs. That was life-changing money. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. Just excellence. I demand the best, and I don't accept anything less. You fail to deliver, you're out. You deliver, and you'll be part of something that will change Chicago's culinary landscape forever. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. I need to know something first, Zara said, leaning forward slightly. That night at Palazzo Nero. What you said to me. Do you actually believe that? Or was it just a power play? For the first time since she'd sat down, Nico looked uncomfortable. Not much, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible shift in his posture. But Zara had spent years reading micro-expressions, learning to detect the subtle tells that revealed what people really thought about the wine she recommended, whether they truly appreciated it or were just pretending. Does it matter? Nico asked finally. Yes, it matters to me. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythmic pattern. Then, I was testing you. I wanted to see how you'd react, whether you'd crumble or fight back. Most people crumble. That doesn't answer my question. Nico's jaw tightened. I grew up in a neighborhood where everyone looked like me, talked like me, thought like me. My father taught me that there were two kinds of people in the world, people like us and everyone else. And for a long time I believed him. It was easier that way. Simpler. And now I'm 43 years old, and I'm starting to realize that my father was a small man who needed to make other people smaller to feel big. Nico met her eyes directly. What I said that night was cruel and wrong. I knew it even as I was saying it. But I also knew that if you were the woman I thought you might be, you wouldn't let it stand. And you didn't. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least of the harm he'd caused. Why should I believe you? Zara asked. Why should I trust anything you say? You shouldn't. Trust is earned, not given. All I'm asking is that you give me the chance to earn it. Nico pulled a folder from the bag beside his chair and slid it across the table. This is the contract. Take it home, read it, have a lawyer look at it if you want. Everything I've promised is in writing. You don't have to decide today. Zara looked at the folder but didn't touch it. And if I say no? Then you say no. I'll call Vincent Moretti tonight and tell him to expect me back at Palazzo Nero next week. The blacklist ends. Life goes back to normal. Just like that. Just like that. I'm offering you an opportunity, Zara, not a prison sentence. If you're not interested, that's fine. I'll find someone else. But you should know, I don't make offers like this often. In fact, I've never made an offer like this. So whatever you decide knowing that this chance won't come again. Zara reached out and picked up the folder. It was heavy, the kind of expensive paper stock that whispered money and importance. I need time to think. Take a week. If I don't hear from you by next Thursday, I'll assume your answer is no. Zara stood. Folder clutched to her chest like a shield. The things you believe about people, the things your father taught you. Have you really changed your mind about them? Or are you just good at saying what people want to hear? Nico stood as well, and for a moment, they faced each other across the small cafe table. Two people from different worlds, connected by a moment of conflict that had somehow transformed into this strange negotiation. I don't know, Nico said, and his honesty surprised her. I'm trying to change. Whether I'm succeeding or just fooling myself, that's an open question. But I figured hiring the woman who called me out on my bullshit would be a good place to start. Despite herself, despite everything, Zara felt the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. That's either the smartest thing I've ever heard or the dumbest. Probably both. Nico extended his hand. Think about it, Zara. Really think about it. This isn't just about the money or the position. It's about building something that matters, something that will last. Zara shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, and then she left, walking out of La Petite Pause into the October afternoon, feeling like she just survived something dangerous but wasn't quite sure what. For the next 4 days, Zara did nothing but think. She thought while she served wine to people who barely noticed her. She thought while she drove home through Chicago traffic. She thought while she lay awake at 3 a.m, staring at her ceiling, the contract folder sitting on her nightstand like a time bomb. She'd read the contract cover to cover 3 times. It was exactly what Nico had promised. Generous salary, full creative control, profit sharing, even a clause that allowed her to leave with 6 months' notice and no penalty. Her cousin Marcus, who'd gone to law school, had looked it over and pronounced it surprisingly fair, actually kind of shockingly fair. But the contract didn't address her real concerns. It couldn't put in writing whether Nico Santoro was genuinely trying to change, or just playing an elaborate game. It couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't be trading one form of degradation for another. It couldn't promise that she wouldn't wake up one day and realized she'd sold her soul for a salary. On the 5th day, Zara called her mother again. "I think I'm going to take it," she said without preamble. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me why." "Because I'm tired, Mama. I'm tired of struggling, tired of scraping by, tired of proving myself over and over again to people who'll never fully accept me anyway. This is a chance to stop fighting so hard just to survive and start actually building something." "Those are good reasons. Now tell me the real reason." Zara closed her eyes. "Because I'm curious. I want to know if people can actually change. I want to know if someone like Nico Santoro can look at his prejudices and decide to be better. And I want to know if I'm strong enough to walk away if the answer turns out to be no." "There's my girl," her mother said softly. "You're not doing this because you're giving up. You're doing it because you're still fighting, just in a different way." "Am I crazy?" "Probably. But you've always been a little crazy. It's one of your best qualities." They talked for another hour, going through all the scenarios, best case, worst case, everything in between. By the time they hung up, Zara felt clearer, more certain. She wouldn't be taking this job out of desperation or defeat. She'd be taking it as a calculated risk, a bet on her own ability to maintain her integrity in a morally complicated situation. And if it didn't work out, well, at least she'd have 6 months' salary saved up and a hell of a story to tell. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after her meeting with Nico, Zara called the number on his business card. He answered on the second ring. "Your answer?" "Yes. I'll take the position. But I have conditions." "I'm listening." "I want everything in writing, not just the salary and benefits, but my authority over the wine program. No interference, no second-guessing, no undermining my decisions. If you hire me, you trust my expertise." "Agreed." "Second, I want quarterly reviews. Not of my performance, of the arrangement. If either of us feels it's not working, we can dissolve the contract without penalty." "That's already in the contract, but I'll make sure it's highlighted." "What else?" Zara took a deep breath. "I want you to make a donation to the Southside Youth Culinary Program. $50,000. Anonymous, no publicity, no tax write-off. Just money to help kids who look like me get opportunities in this industry." There was a pause. Then Nico said, "$75,000. And it won't be anonymous, it'll be from the restaurant in your name. You should get credit for pushing for it." Zara blinked, surprised. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's a good idea and because you're right. If I'm serious about changing, I need to put my money where my mouth is." Literally. She could hear the smile in his voice. "Besides, it's good business. Shows the community we're invested in more than just profit." "When do I start?" "The restaurant won't open for another 4 months. We're still in construction. But I want you involved from the beginning. Design of the wine cellar, selection of glassware, building the initial inventory. Can you start in 2 weeks?" "I need to give Palazzo Nero proper notice." "Of course. I'll call Vincent today, smooth things over." "And Zara? Welcome to Sapor." "Sapor? It's Italian for taste." Seemed fitting. After she hung up, Zara sat in her apartment, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. She'd agreed to work for a man who'd insulted her, who represented everything she'd been taught to fear and avoid. But she'd also negotiated from a position of strength, demanded respect, and ensured that some good would come from the arrangement beyond her own advancement. Was it a compromise? Yes. Was it a betrayal of her principles? She didn't think so. It was something more complex. A recognition that the world rarely offered perfect choices, and that sometimes courage meant engaging with the messy reality rather than waiting for ideal circumstances that would never come. She called Vincent next, asking for a meeting. Vincent Moretti's relief was palpable when Zara told him she was leaving. Not because he wanted her gone, but because her departure solved his most pressing problem. Nico Santoro had already called, as promised, and Palazzo Nero's exile was officially over. The restaurant would survive. People would keep their jobs. "I don't know whether to thank you or worry about you," Vincent said, shaking his head. "Working for Santoro. Zara, be careful. He's not like other restaurateurs." "I know what he is." "Do you? Really?" Vincent leaned forward, his expression grave. "I've seen the restaurants he's involved with. They're successful, sure. Beautiful, popular, profitable. But there's always something else going on. Money moving in ways that don't quite make sense. People coming and going at odd hours. It's not just about the food, understand? I understand. But I'm going in with my eyes open. And I have an exit strategy if things go wrong. Vincent sighed. You're one of the best sommeliers I've ever worked with. That's not flattery, it's fact. Whatever happens with Santoro, don't let it change that. Don't let him make you into something you're not. Zara worked her 2-week notice with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Palazzo Nero had been her home for 3 years, the place where she'd proven herself, where she'd built her reputation. Leaving felt like closing a chapter. Necessary but not painless. Marco threw her a going-away party on her last night. A small gathering of staff members in the wine cellar after closing. They drank good wine, some of the bottles Zara had been saving for special occasions, and told stories and pretended that everything was fine. You're going to kill it at Sapor, Marco said, slightly drunk and very earnest. And when you do, remember the little people who believed in you before you were fancy. I'm not fancy, Zara protested. You're going to be. You're going to have people writing articles about you, calling you the best sommelier in Chicago. And you'll deserve every bit of it. Marco raised his glass. To Zara Williams, who doesn't take shit from anyone. Not even mob bosses. Especially not mob bosses, Teresa added, and everyone laughed, the wine making them brave enough to acknowledge what they normally didn't discuss. When Zara left Palazzo Nero for the last time, she felt something shift inside her. She'd entered this building as one person, a woman still trying to prove she belonged. She was leaving as someone different. A woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to demand it be recognized. The next chapter was about to begin, and she was ready. Sapor's construction site was in River North, one of Chicago's trendiest neighborhoods. The space had formerly been a bank. All soaring ceilings and marble columns, the kind of architectural gravitas that couldn't be faked. Nico's designers were transforming it into something spectacular, preserving the historic elements while adding modern touches that would make it feel both timeless and contemporary. Zara's first day, Nico gave her a tour of the space, pointing out where the kitchen would be, the dining room, the bar. But he spent the most time on the wine cellar, a climate-controlled space in what had been the bank's vault, with custom racking that could hold over 5,000 bottles. This is yours, Nico said simply. Design it however you want. Whatever you need, you get. Zara walked through the empty space, her mind already racing with possibilities. She could organize by region or by style. She could create a separate section for rare vintages, another for natural wines. She could build something truly extraordinary here, a wine program that would be talked about nationally. I want to focus on small producers, she said, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. Not just the big names everyone knows. Winemakers who are doing interesting things, taking risks, making wines with personality. Sounds expensive. It will be. But it'll also be distinctive. Anyone can stock their cellar with Bordeaux and Burgundy. I want Sapor to showcase wines people can't get anywhere else. Nico smiled. That's exactly why I hired you. Do it. Over the next 3 months, Zara threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She traveled to wine regions across Europe and California, meeting with winemakers, tasting hundreds of bottles, negotiating deals. She worked with the designers to perfect the cellar's lighting, with the contractors to ensure the climate control was flawless, with the glassware suppliers to find the perfect stems for each type of wine. She hired a team, 3 assistant sommeliers, all young and hungry and eager to learn. She trained them not just in wine knowledge but in the philosophy she wanted Sapor to embody. That wine wasn't about snobbery or exclusion, but about connection and shared experience. And gradually, despite her initial wariness, she found herself developing a complicated respect for Nico Santoro. He was demanding, yes. Exacting. He noticed everything and forgot nothing. But he also listened to her opinions, deferred to her expertise, and never once made her feel like anything less than a full partner in the endeavor. When suppliers tried to undercut her, he backed her up. When designers wanted to compromise on the cellar specs, he told them to give her whatever she wanted. He was also, she discovered, genuinely trying to change. It showed in small ways at first. The way he spoke to the construction workers, respectful, polite, learning their names. The way he handled conflicts with contractors, Firm but fair, never using his power to bully. The way he talked about the restaurant's mission, not just as a business venture, but as something that would contribute to the neighborhood, create jobs, become a community anchor. One day, about 2 months into the project, Zara found him in the unfinished dining room, staring at the space with an expression she'd never seen before, something almost vulnerable. "Second thoughts?" she asked, walking over to stand beside him. "More like reflection." Nico glanced at her. "My father owned restaurants. Did you know that?" "I didn't." 3 of them. Typical Italian-American places, red sauce and checkered tablecloths. He ran them the way he ran everything else in his life, with an iron fist and no room for questions. Staff were terrified of him. Customers loved him because he was charming to their faces, but behind the scenes he was a tyrant. "And you're trying not to be him," Zara said softly. "I'm trying. Whether I'm succeeding." Nico shrugged. "That's probably not for me to judge." "For what it's worth," Zara said carefully, "I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. Not perfect, but better." Nico looked at her with an expression that might have been gratitude. "That means more coming from you than you probably realize. You don't bullshit me, Zara. You never have. So when you say something like that, I believe you actually mean it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people who'd started as adversaries and were slowly, tentatively becoming something like colleagues, maybe even friends. "Can I ask you something?" Nico said finally. "Sure. Do you think people can really change? I mean fundamentally change, not just surface-level behavior modification." Zara considered the question seriously. "I think people can change if they want to badly enough and if they're willing to do the work. But I also think change is ongoing. It's not like you flip a switch and suddenly you're a different person. It's a daily choice every day to be better than you were yesterday." "That sounds exhausting." "It is. But so is staying the same when you know you should be better." Nico laughed, a genuine sound that softened his usually harsh features. "You should have been a philosopher instead of a sommelier." "Wine is philosophy," Zara countered. "Every bottle tells a story about time, place, human effort, and transformation. Grapes that are bitter and inedible becoming something complex and beautiful. If that's not a metaphor for change, I don't know what is." Sapor opened on a Friday in February, 4 months after Zara had agreed to join the project. The buzz had been building for weeks. Articles in Chicago Magazine and the Tribune, social media speculation, reservations booked solid for the first 3 months. Opening night was a carefully curated affair. Food critics, industry insiders, influential Chicagoans who could make or break a restaurant's reputation. Zara wore a custom suit in deep burgundy, the color of her favorite wines, and stood in her wine cellar feeling a mixture of pride and terror. This was it. Everything she'd worked for, all the risks she'd taken coming down to this one night. "You ready?" Nico appeared in the doorway, looking sharp in a black suit, his usual edge softened by something that might have been nervousness. "As I'll ever be. They're going to love it. They're going to love you. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've watched you build this program, Zara. I've seen the passion you put into every selection, every pairing, every detail. This isn't just a job to you. It's art. And art like that, people recognize it." The evening passed in a blur of wine presentations, pairings, conversations with critics and guests. Zara moved through it all with practiced grace, describing terroirs and vintages, telling the stories behind each bottle, making people fall in love with wines they'd never heard of. She paired a Slovenian orange wine with the crudo, its tannic structure cutting through the richness of the fish. She served a Jura Savagnin with the chicken course, its oxidative notes playing beautifully against the herbal sauce. And for dessert, she presented a Moscato d'Asti that was so perfectly balanced between sweetness and acidity that one critic actually closed her eyes in pleasure. By the end of the night, Zara knew they'd succeeded. She could see it in people's faces, hear it in their conversations, feel it in the energy of the room. Sapor wasn't just another high-end restaurant. It was something special. As the last guests left, Zara found herself back in the wine cellar, savoring the quiet after the chaos. She ran her hand along the racks of bottles, feeling a satisfaction deeper than anything she'd experienced at Palazzo Nero. This was hers. She'd built this. There you are. Nico entered carrying 2 glasses and a bottle. I thought we should celebrate properly. Just us, the people who actually did the work. He poured. A Barolo, Zara noticed with amusement. Not the same producer as the one from that fateful night, but close. A callback, an inside joke, an acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. To Sapor, Nico said, raising his glass. To taking risks, Zara countered, raising hers. They drank and the wine was perfect. Complex, structured, with layers that revealed themselves slowly. A wine that demanded attention and rewarded patience. I need to tell you something, Nico said after a moment. That night at Palazzo Nero when you stood up to me, I went home and couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my mind, hearing your words, feeling that moment when I realized someone was seeing through all my bullshit. Nico, let me finish. My whole life I've used power to control situations to make people bend to my will. It worked mostly, but it also made me isolated, surrounded by yes men and people who were terrified of me. And then you came along and refused to play that game. You treated me like I was just a man who'd said something cruel and needed to be called out for it. You were a man who said something cruel. I am. I'm still working on that part of myself, the part that learned to diminish other people to feel bigger. But working with you these past months, watching how you lead your team with respect and high standards, seeing how you command authority without cruelty. Nico paused, seeming to struggle for words. You've taught me more than you probably realize. Zara felt something tight in her chest loosen. You've surprised me too. I came into this expecting the worst, ready to leave the second things went sideways. But you've been good, fair, human. Don't give me too much credit. I'm still figuring this out, still making mistakes. We all are. That's the point. They finished their wine in companionable silence. 2 people who'd found an unexpected alliance in the messiness of real life, where villains could choose to be better and heroes had to make complicated compromises. The reviews came in over the next week and they were spectacular. Chicago Magazine called Sapor a revelation in fine dining. The Tribune praised Zara's wine program as one of the most thoughtfully curated cellars in the country. Food and Wine ran a feature titled The Sommelier Who's Redefining Wine Service, complete with a photo shoot of Zara in her element, surrounded by bottles, confident and beautiful and exactly where she belonged. The article mentioned her background, the struggles, the obstacles overcome, the historic nature of her being one of very few Black sommeliers at this level. But it focused more on her expertise, her vision, her incredible palate. She wasn't a symbol or a token. She was simply one of the best in her field. Within a month, Sapor had a waiting list 3 months long. Within 3 months, they were being mentioned in conversations about Michelin stars. Within 6 months, Zara was fielding offers from other restaurants, wine publications wanting her to write columns, conferences wanting her to speak. She turned them all down. She'd found something rare at Sapor, a place where she could do her best work, where she was respected and valued, where she was building something that mattered. And then, 7 months after opening, everything almost fell apart. It started with a visit from 2 FBI agents who wanted to ask Nico some questions about his business dealings. Zara wasn't privy to the details, but she noticed the tension, the worried looks from staff, the sudden appearance of lawyers in expensive suits. Then a Tribune article ran, digging into Nico's background, connecting him to various alleged criminal activities, suggesting that Sapor might be more than just a restaurant. Zara's phone started ringing. Friends warning her to distance herself, her mother begging her to be careful, reporters asking for comment. She called a meeting with Nico in his office after hours, when the restaurant was closed and they could speak privately. Tell me the truth, she said without preamble. All of it. What's really going on? Nico looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. My past is complicated. I've done things, legal things, but morally questionable things. Business deals that benefited me at others' expense. Relationships with people who were definitely not on the right side of the law. The FBI has been investigating my family for years, trying to prove connections that may or may not exist. Are you involved in organized crime? Define involved. Do I know people who are? Yes. Have I done business with them? In the past, yes. Am I currently engaged in anything illegal? No. Sapor is clean, Zara. I made sure of that because I wanted this to be different. I wanted it to be legitimate. But the shadow follows you anyway. The shadow always follows me. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I can't escape my family name, my history, the assumptions people make. I can only try to build something better going forward. Zara stood and walked to the window, looking out at Chicago's nighttime skyline. She thought about the choice she'd made 7 months ago, the calculated risk that had brought her here. She thought about everything she'd built, everything she stood to lose. I need to know, she said quietly. If I stay, if I keep working here, will I be implicated in anything? Will my name get dragged through the mud because of your past? I don't know, Nico admitted. I can't promise you won't face consequences just from association. But I can promise you that nothing happening at Sapor is illegal. The restaurant is clean. Your program is clean. You've done nothing wrong. That might not matter to the court of public opinion. No, it might not. Zara turned to face him. This is exactly what I was afraid of when I took this job. That I'd be trading one kind of degradation for another. That I'd go from being insulted to my face to being destroyed by association. I understand if you want to leave. I'll give you a glowing recommendation, help you land anywhere you want. Your career won't suffer. I'll make sure of that. It was tempting. Walk away clean, preserve her reputation. Avoid the potential scandal. Find another position where the moral complications weren't quite so pronounced. But Zara had never chosen the easy path. She'd never walked away from a fight just because it got difficult. I'm not leaving, she said finally. But I need something from you. Anything. I need you to cooperate fully with the investigation. Answer their questions, give them whatever they need to clear your name. And I need you to be completely transparent with me going forward. No surprises, no secrets. If something's happening that could affect the restaurant or my position, I need to know about it. Done. You have my word. Your word needs to be worth something, Nico. I'm betting my entire career on it. I know. And I won't let you down. The investigation dragged on for months, a dark cloud hanging over Sapor's success. Some critics wrote follow-up pieces questioning whether they'd been too positive in their initial reviews, whether they should have looked more closely at the ownership. Some regular customers stopped coming, uncomfortable with the implications. But others, many others, remained loyal. They came because the food was extraordinary, because the wine program was unmatched, because the experience was worth it regardless of the controversy. And through it all, Zara kept working. She trained her staff, she curated her cellar. She maintained the standards that had made Sapor special. She gave interviews defending the restaurant, carefully separating Nico's personal history from the business they'd built together. I judge people by their actions, not their associations, she told one journalist. Nico Santoro gave me an opportunity when others wouldn't. He supported my vision, trusted my expertise, and created an environment where I can do my best work. Whatever his past might be, his present is focused on running a legitimate, excellent restaurant. The FBI eventually concluded their investigation without bringing charges. The cloud didn't entirely lift. Some suspicion would always linger, but the immediate crisis passed. Sapor survived. And in surviving, it became something more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of second chances, of redemption, of the complicated reality that people and situations rarely fit into neat moral categories. A year after opening, Sapor received its first Michelin star. Zara was in the wine cellar when she got the news, and she cried huge, ugly, cathartic tears that released months of tension and doubt and fear. Marco drove in from Palazzo Nero to celebrate with her, bringing champagne and nostalgia. You did it, he kept saying, slightly drunk and utterly sincere. You fucking did it. We did it, Zara corrected. All of us. Her mother came to dinner that week, sitting at a special table in the wine cellar, surrounded by bottles worth more than she'd made in a year at any of her 3 jobs. Zara served her a tasting menu with perfect pairings, watching her mother's face light up with each course. My baby girl, her mother said, tears in her eyes. My brilliant, brave, beautiful baby girl. I couldn't have done it without you, Mama. You taught me to stand up, to fight back, to never accept being made small. I taught you. But you had the courage to actually do it. 2 years after that confrontation at Palazzo Nero, Zara stood in Sapor's dining room during a private moment before service, looking around at everything she'd built. The wine cellar with its 5,000 carefully selected bottles. The team she'd trained, who now moved through service with confidence and skill. The critical acclaim, the loyal customers, the sense of having created something that would last. She thought about the girl she'd been, scared, angry, determined to prove herself worthy of a place at tables where she'd never been welcome. She thought about the woman she'd become. Still fighting, but from a position of strength, no longer asking for permission to exist in spaces she'd earned through excellence. The journey hadn't been clean. It hadn't been simple. She'd made compromises, formed alliances with complicated people, navigated moral gray areas that her younger self might have rejected outright. But she'd also changed lives. The $75,000 Nico had donated in her name had funded scholarships for 15 students in the Southside Youth Culinary Program. 3 of them were now working in professional kitchens, including one who'd just been accepted into a prestigious culinary school. She changed Nico too, maybe. He was still Nico Santoro, still connected to his past, still wielding power in ways that made her uncomfortable sometimes. But he was also trying day by day to be better than his father had been, to use his influence for more than just personal gain. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could ask, not perfection but effort. Not redemption but the daily choice to be better. Nico found her there, standing in the golden hour light that filtered through the windows just like it had at Palazzo Nero that fateful October evening. Reminiscing? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Reflecting. There's a difference. What's the conclusion? Zara smiled. That I made the right choice. Not an easy choice, not a simple choice, but the right one. I'm glad. For what it's worth, offering you that job was the best business decision I've ever made. And the best personal one too. Because I keep you honest? Because you see me as a person, not a caricature. You see my potential to be better, but you also don't let me off the hook when I fall short. That's rare. That's valuable. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the last preparations before the evening service. Sapor was about to come alive with sound and energy, and the magic that happened when food and wine and human connection combined into something greater than the sum of their parts. You know what the best part is? Zara said softly. What? I don't feel invisible anymore. Not here. Not anywhere. Whatever else happens, whatever challenges come, I know that I matter. My voice matters. My expertise matters. Me, Zara Williams, a black girl from the South Side. I matter. You always mattered, Nico said. Some of us were just too ignorant to see it. But you learn to see. That's what gives me hope. Not that people are perfect, but that they can learn. They can change. They can choose to be better. The staff started arriving, filling the restaurant with life and laughter, and the anticipatory energy of another service. Zara's team greeted her with respect and genuine affection, not because they feared her, but because she'd earned their trust through competence and compassion. This was her kingdom. This was her legacy. Not the wine cellar or the critical acclaim or the Michelin star, but the example she set every day, of excellence without cruelty, of standards without snobbery, of fighting for dignity while maintaining grace. She'd started this journey as a woman who'd been insulted, dismissed, made to feel less than human by someone who thought power gave him the right to diminish others. She'd ended it as the architect of her own destiny, the master of her craft, the proof that standing up for yourself, even when it's dangerous, even when it's difficult, even when the outcome is uncertain, is always worth it. Because some silences are more damaging than any risk. Because some fights are worth having even if you might lose. Because dignity once claimed can never truly be taken away. You've just witnessed what happens when someone refuses to accept the unacceptable. When someone looks power in the face and says, "No, not today, not ever. But here's what I need you to understand." This story didn't end with success because Zara was lucky. It ended with success because she was brave. Because she chose courage over comfort, dignity over safety, truth over silence. How many moments have you witnessed where someone needed you to speak up? How many times have you stayed silent because it was easier, because you told yourself it wasn't your fight, because you were afraid of the consequences? Zara Williams could have walked away. She could have accepted the insult and moved on with her life. But she didn't. And neither can you. Not anymore. Not after hearing this. The next time you see injustice, whether it's in a restaurant, a boardroom, a classroom, or anywhere else. You have a choice. You can be a bystander, or you can be like Zara. You can let power win through your silence, or you can speak up and change the trajectory of someone's life. Maybe even your own. Asterisk, asterisk. This isn't just Zara's story. It's a mirror being held up to every single one of us. And the question it asks is simple but brutal. When your moment comes, and it will come, who will you choose to be? The answer you give will define you more than you know. 3 years after Sapporo opened, Zara received an invitation that would have seemed impossible back in her Palazzo Nero days. The James Beard Foundation wanted to honor her as one of the country's most influential sommeliers. Not just successful, influential. Someone who was changing the industry, making it more inclusive, proving that excellence could come from unexpected places. The ceremony was in New York, at a glittering event filled with culinary royalty. Zara stood backstage in a stunning emerald gown, her natural hair styled in an elaborate updo that had taken 3 hours, her hands remarkably steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "You nervous?" asked Chef Williams, no relation, but they bonded over the shared name, who was receiving an award in a different category. "Terrified," Zara admitted. "I'm about to give a speech in front of everyone who's anyone in this industry. People I've admired for years. People whose opinions matter. Then tell them something that matters. Don't waste this moment on pleasantries." When Zara's name was called, she walked onto that stage with her head high, accepting the medal with hands that only trembled slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces, white faces mostly even now, and thought about the 8-year-old girl who'd been told she wasn't ready for the advanced reading program. The 14-year-old watching her mother work herself to exhaustion. The 22-year-old being passed over for jobs she was overqualified for. She thought about Nico Santoro insulting her in front of his associates, and the choice she'd made to fight back instead of accepting degradation. And she spoke. "When I was starting out in this industry, someone told me that I should be grateful just to be in the room. That I should accept whatever scraps of opportunity came my way and not ask for more, because people who looked like me didn't get to be sommeliers at high-end restaurants. We got to serve the wine maybe, but we didn't get to select it, program it, build something meaningful with it." The room had gone very quiet. "I'm standing here tonight because I refuse to be grateful for scraps. Because when someone tried to diminish me, I fought back. And because one person, imperfect, complicated, with a problematic past, looked at that fight and saw potential instead of insubordination." Zara paused, letting her words sink in. "This award isn't just about me. It's about every person in this industry who's been made to feel invisible, who's been told they don't belong, who's had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. This is for the young people who are wondering if there's a place for them in fine dining, in wine culture, in the culinary world that seems designed to exclude them." She looked directly into the cameras, knowing her words would be recorded, shared, remembered. "There is a place for you. Not because someone will kindly make room, but because you will demand it. You will earn it through excellence and expertise and the refusal to accept being made small. You will find allies in unexpected places, people who are willing to examine their own prejudices and choose to be better. And you will build something so undeniable, so exceptional, that even the people who wanted to dismiss you will have no choice but to recognize your worth." The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. People stood, not everyone but enough. Enough to matter. Backstage afterward, Zara was swarmed by people wanting to talk to her. Young black and brown sommeliers and chefs, all saying variations of the same thing. "Thank you. Thank you for saying it. Thank you for being proof that it's possible." But the conversation that stuck with her most came from an older white sommelier, someone she recognized from magazines and wine publications. He approached her hesitantly, almost sheepishly. "I need to apologize," he said quietly. "You probably don't remember, but 6 years ago, you applied for a position at my restaurant. Passed you over. I told myself it was because you lacked experience, but the truth is, I couldn't picture a black woman representing my wine program to my clientele. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Zara looked at him for a long moment, weighing her response. She could be gracious, accept the apology and move on. Or she could be honest. She chose honesty. "I remember," she said. "I remember because that rejection came right after 3 others just like it. I remember because I went home that night and cried. wondering if I'd made a mistake choosing this career. I remember because that kind of pain doesn't just disappear. It becomes part of your story. The sommelier's face crumpled slightly. I understand if you can't forgive me. I'm not interested in forgiving you, Zara said, her voice steady but not cruel. I'm interested in you being better. I'm interested in you examining why you made that choice and making sure you never make it again. I'm interested in you using your influence, because you have a lot of it, to open doors for people who look like I did 6 years ago. I will. I promise I will. Then your apology means something. Otherwise, it's just words to make yourself feel better. She walked away, feeling the weight and power of her own voice. Not just the voice that spoke to critics and customers about wine, but the voice that spoke truth to power, that demanded accountability, that refused to let comfort obscure justice. Back in Chicago, Sapor had become something more than just Zara's professional home. It had become a training ground for the next generation of hospitality professionals, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds. Zara had convinced Nico to start an apprenticeship program, bringing in students from the Southside Youth Culinary Program for intensive rotations in the wine cellar. She taught them not just about wine but about confidence, about claiming space, about turning knowledge into authority. One of her apprentices was Maya, a 19-year-old black girl from the same neighborhood where Zara had grown up. She reminded Zara of herself at that age, hungry, brilliant, terrified of not being good enough. I don't know if I belong here, Maya confessed one evening after service, sitting in the wine cellar surrounded by bottles she'd been learning to identify. Every time a customer looks at me weird, every time someone questions whether I really know what I'm talking about, I wonder if I should just quit before I embarrass myself. Zara sat down across from her, remembering similar doubts, similar fears. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was your age. Belonging isn't something that's granted to you. It's something you claim through competence and courage. Those customers who look at you weird, they're not questioning you, they're questioning their own assumptions. And every time you prove those assumptions wrong, you're not just succeeding for yourself. You're making it easier for the next person who looks like you. But what if I mess up? What if I recommend the wrong wine, or can't answer a question? Then you mess up. Everyone does. The difference is that when a white sommelier makes a mistake, it's seen as an individual error. When we make mistakes, some people see it as confirmation of their prejudices. That's not fair, but it's reality. So you work harder, study more, become so undeniably excellent that your mistakes are clearly just human error, not proof of some imaginary lack of competence. Maya was quiet for a moment. That sounds exhausting. It is. It absolutely is. But you know what's more exhausting? Living with the regret of not trying. Looking back and wondering what you could have achieved if you'd just been brave enough to claim your place. How do you do it? How do you stay brave when everything feels so hard? Zara considered the question carefully. I think about my mother working 3 jobs. I think about every black person who came before me in this industry, fighting battles I'll never know about so that I could have opportunities they didn't. I think about the young people like you who are watching to see if it's possible. And I think about that moment, you know the one I mean, when someone tries to make you feel small, and I remember that I have a choice in how I respond. The moment with Mr. Santoro. Everyone knows about that, huh? Maya smiled slightly. It's basically legend. The sommelier who told off a mob boss and got promoted instead of killed. It wasn't quite that dramatic. But yes, that moment taught me something crucial. Power only wins if you let it. The minute you stand up, the minute you refuse to accept being diminished, you shift the dynamic. You might face consequences, I definitely did, but you also reclaim your dignity. And dignity, once claimed, changes everything. The 4th year of Sapor's operation brought unexpected challenges. A pandemic swept through the world, shutting down restaurants, devastating the hospitality industry, forcing everyone to rethink how they did business. Zara and Nico met in the empty restaurant, staring at months of reservations that would have to be canceled, at a staff that would need to be supported somehow, at an uncertain future that threatened everything they'd built. We could close temporarily, Nico said. Just shut down until this passes. And leave our staff without income? Without health insurance in the middle of a health crisis? Zara shook her head. There has to be another way. They spent the next week brainstorming, consulting with their team, researching what other restaurants were doing. And they came up with a plan that was risky but aligned with their values. Sapor would pivot to a hybrid model. They'd offer high-end takeout and delivery, carefully packaged tasting menus with wine pairings, complete with detailed instructions for reheating and serving. But they'd also transform part of their operation into a community kitchen, preparing and distributing meals to healthcare workers and vulnerable populations in the South Side. It's not sustainable long-term, their accountant warned. You'll be operating at a loss on the community kitchen side. Then we operate at a loss, Nico said, glancing at Zara for confirmation. She nodded. This is about more than just profit. It's about being the kind of business we want to be. One that serves the community, not just the wealthy. The transformation was exhausting. Zara had to completely reimagine her wine program for a format where customers wouldn't have her expertise immediately available. She created detailed tasting notes, video guides, even a hotline where people could call with questions while they were enjoying their meals. Her apprentices stepped up, taking on more responsibility, learning to be leaders in a crisis. Maya particularly shone, helping coordinate the community kitchen operation with efficiency and compassion. The wealthy customers who'd been Sapor's bread and butter proved surprisingly supportive. Many ordered multiple tasting menus per week, not because they needed the food, but because they wanted to help keep the restaurant afloat. Some explicitly asked for their payments to go toward supporting staff or funding the community kitchen. And the community kitchen itself became something beautiful. Zara found herself working alongside her apprentices, plating meals for nurses and teachers and delivery drivers, people who'd never been able to afford Sapor's dining room but deserved the same care and quality. One evening, a nurse came by to pick up meals for her unit. She was exhausted, still in scrubs, clearly at the end of a devastating shift. When she saw the care that had gone into the packaging, the handwritten notes of encouragement, the quality of the food, she started crying. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you doing this for us?" Zara thought about her mother, about those 3 jobs, about coming home at midnight too tired to eat. She thought about communities that were always overlooked, always dismissed, always told they didn't matter. "Because you deserve it," Zara said simply. "Because your work matters, your well-being matters, you matter. And we wanted you to know that." The nurse hugged her and Zara hugged back. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Excellence wasn't just about Michelin stars and James Beard awards. It was about using your skills, your platform, your privilege to lift others up. It was about remembering where you came from and staying connected to the communities that shaped you. When the pandemic finally eased and restaurants could reopen, Sapor was forever changed. They kept the community kitchen component, now operating it 1 day a week as a permanent fixture. They hired 3 of the healthcare workers who'd been recipients of the meals during the crisis, bringing new perspectives into the operation. And they expanded the apprenticeship program, doubling the number of students they could train, creating pathways for people who'd never imagined working in fine dining. Zara's reputation continued to grow. She was invited to speak at conferences, to write for major publications, to consult with restaurants trying to build more inclusive programs. But she stayed rooted at Sapor, committed to the work she'd started, the vision she and Nico had built together. 5 years after that confrontation at Palazzo Nero, Zara received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from the Court of Master Sommeliers, inviting her to take the examination for the Master Sommelier diploma, the highest credential in her profession, held by fewer than 300 people worldwide. The pass rate was notoriously low. The exam was legendarily difficult. And very, very few Black people had ever achieved the title. "I don't know if I can do this," she told Nico, showing him the letter. "The failure rate is something like 90%. What if I don't pass? What if I publicly fail after all this success?" "Then you fail publicly and try again," Nico said. "But Zara, listen to me. You're already one of the best sommeliers in the country. Everyone knows it. This exam is just a formality, a piece of paper that confirms what's already true. It's more than that. Zara struggled to articulate the weight of it. It's about proving something. Not to them, but to every young person who looks like me and wonders if they could do this. If I pass, I become evidence that it's possible. If I fail, if you fail, you become evidence that these systems are designed to exclude people like you, and then you fight to change the systems. Either way, you're moving the world forward." Zara studied for 6 months with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She tasted blind, practiced service, memorized obscure wine regions and vintage variations. She worked with tutors, joined study groups, pushed herself harder than she'd ever pushed before. The exam took place over 3 days in California. Theory, tasting, and practical service. Each component was grueling, designed to break even the most knowledgeable candidates. Zara moved through it in a state of focused terror, drawing on years of experience, countless hours of study, and a determination that had been forged in much more hostile environments than an examination room. When she finished the final practical service component, she had no idea if she'd passed. The examiners' faces had been inscrutable, giving away nothing. She flew back to Chicago and tried to return to normal life, but the waiting was torture. Results wouldn't come for weeks. Every day felt like an eternity. Maya found her in the wine cellar one evening, staring at bottles without really seeing them. "You passed," Maya said confidently. "I know you did. You can't possibly know that. I know because I've watched you work. I've seen you identify wines that even the distributors couldn't properly label. I've seen you create pairings that make grown adults cry. You're a master sommelier in everything but the title. The exam is just catching up to reality." Zara smiled despite her anxiety. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Zara was in her office going over inventory orders when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Williams? This is calling from the Court of Master Sommeliers. Congratulations. You've passed all 3 sections of the Master Sommelier examination." For a moment Zara couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she'd just heard. "Ms. Williams? Are you there?" "I'm here. I passed? All 3 sections." "Yes. You scored exceptionally well, actually. Welcome to the Court of Master Sommeliers." Zara hung up and sat in stunned silence. Then she put her head down on her desk and sobbed. Huge, cathartic sobs that released years of pressure, doubt, fear, and determination. She was a master sommelier, one of fewer than 300 in the world, one of a tiny handful of Black people to ever achieve the credential. She'd done it. When she finally composed herself enough to leave her office, she found her entire staff waiting outside. Nico, Maya, her assistant sommeliers, even some of the line cooks. Someone had apparently been listening at the door and spread the news. "Master Sommelier Zara Williams," they shouted in unison. And then there was champagne, real champagne, the good stuff, and hugs and tears and laughter. Nico pulled her aside during the celebration. "I'm proud of you. But I want you to know you were already a master before this exam. This just makes it official. Thank you. For everything. For taking a chance on me, for supporting me, for..." "Stop. You earned everything you have. I just didn't stand in your way. That's the minimum any decent person should do. You did more than that. You changed. You worked on yourself, examined your prejudices, became someone better than you were. That's not the minimum. That's courage." Nico looked uncomfortable with the praise, but he accepted it with a small nod. "We both changed. That's what this whole thing has been about, hasn't it? 2 people who started as adversaries, learning from each other, growing together, building something neither of us could have built alone." The news of Zara's achievement spread quickly. Wine Spectator ran a cover story. The New York Times profiled her. Suddenly, every major restaurant in the country wanted her to consult, to advise, to bring some of her magic to their programs. But Zara stayed at Sapor. She built something here that mattered more than prestige or money. She created a model for what the restaurant industry could be. Excellent but inclusive, prestigious but grounded, successful but socially conscious. And she continued to teach. The apprenticeship program expanded again, now taking students from across the country. Young people who'd been told they didn't belong in fine dining, who'd faced every obstacle Zara had faced and more, came to Sapor to learn not just about wine but about claiming space, demanding respect, building a career in a hostile industry. One of her students asked her once, "Do you ever regret it? That night with Mr. Santoro? Everything that came after could have gone so wrong." Zara thought about it carefully before answering. "I don't regret standing up for myself. I'll never regret that. But I also don't regret taking the job when he offered it. even though that meant forming an alliance with someone whose values I questioned. Life doesn't offer us pure choices. It offers us complicated situations where we have to weigh our principles against our survival, our ideals against our impact. So how do you know when to compromise and when to stand firm? You stand firm on dignity, on respect, on your inherent worth as a human being. Those are non-negotiable. But on the question of who you work with, who you learn from, who you ally yourself with, there's room for nuance. Room to recognize that people are complicated, that growth is possible, that sometimes the best way to change a system is from the inside. 7 years after that October evening at Palazzo Nero, Zara stood in Sapor's wine cellar, her wine cellar, preparing for another service. She was 39 now, a master sommelier, a James Beard Award winner, one of the most respected professionals in her field. But more importantly, she was free. Free from the fear that had once defined her life, free from the need to constantly prove herself, free from the weight of other people's prejudices. She'd learned that freedom wasn't the absence of struggle. It was the confidence that you could handle whatever struggle came your way. It was knowing your worth so deeply that no insult could touch it. It was building something so substantial that it couldn't be dismissed or diminished. Maya appeared in the doorway, now the head assistant sommelier, wearing her certification pin with pride. Table 7 is requesting you specifically. They want your recommendation for their anniversary dinner. Zara smiled. Table 7. Always table 7 where everything had started. Tell them I'll be right there. She selected a bottle, something special, something that would make the evening memorable, and made her way to the table. The couple sitting there was young, interracial, looking at her with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Master Sommelier Williams, the woman said, a hint of awe in her voice. It's an honor. We've been following your career. You're the reason I'm studying to be a sommelier now. Zara felt something shift in her chest, that beautiful moment of recognition that her journey had meaning beyond herself. Then let me help make tonight perfect. She presented the wine, told its story, created a connection between the bottle and the couple's celebration. She saw their eyes light up with the first taste, watched them lean into each other, understanding that she wasn't just serving wine. She was facilitating love, connection, memory. This was what it was all about. Not the awards or the recognition or the revenge against people who dismissed her. It was about excellence in service of human joy. It was about using her knowledge to create moments that mattered. It was about transformation, of grapes into wine, of struggle into strength, of insults into inspiration. After service, Zara found herself once again in the wine cellar, that sacred space that had become her sanctuary. Nico joined her as he often did, two old allies sharing a quiet moment at the end of a long day. Do you ever think about that night? He asked. The beginning of all this? All the time. It's the moment that changed everything. For me too. Nico poured them each a glass of wine. Not expensive, just good, the kind of honest wine that didn't need pretension. I was a different person then. Smaller. Meaner. Trapped by the limitations my father taught me. And now I'm trying to be someone my children can respect. Someone who uses power to build rather than destroy. Someone who understands that strength isn't about dominance. It's about creating space for others to be strong too. They drank in comfortable silence. Two people who'd taken a moment of conflict and transformed it into something redemptive. Thank you, Nico said finally, for not giving up on me. For seeing potential where others only saw problems. Thank you for being willing to change. For doing the work even when it was uncomfortable. For proving that transformation is possible. Before I finish this story, if it moved you, if it made you think differently, subscribe to this channel. We tell stories that challenge you, inspire you, and remind you of your own power. And that's where the real story ends. Not with a confrontation or a triumph, but with two people who learn to be better together. With a wine cellar that became a training ground for the next generation. With a restaurant that proved excellence and ethics aren't mutually exclusive. With a woman who refused to be made small and, in refusing, changed not just her own life but the entire landscape of her industry. But here's what you need to understand. This story isn't finished. It's ongoing. Happening right now in restaurants and boardrooms and classrooms across the world. Every time someone stands up to injustice, every time someone demands to be treated with dignity, Every time someone uses their position to lift others up, the story continues. And you're part of it whether you want to be or not. Because you've heard Zara's story now. You know what's possible when someone chooses courage over comfort. You know what happens when people refuse to accept the unacceptable. So the question isn't whether you'll face your own table 7 moment. The question is, when you do, when someone tries to make you or someone else small, when power tries to win through intimidation, when the easy choice is silence, what will you do? Will you speak up? Will you stand firm? Will you be the person who changes the story? Or will you be the person who watches it happen and does nothing? The guilt you feel right now, that discomfort in your chest, that voice whispering about all the times you stayed silent, that's your conscience telling you the truth. It's telling you that you have power you haven't been using, courage you haven't been claiming, a voice that deserves to be heard. Zara Williams was just a sommelier who got tired of being disrespected. That's all. She wasn't a superhero. She wasn't specially chosen. She was just a woman who decided that enough was enough. You can make that same decision. Today. Right now. In whatever situation you're facing, whatever moment is coming your way. The world is full of Nico Santoros. People who use power carelessly, who diminish others without thought, who need to be called out. But it's also full of potential Nico Santoros. People who are capable of change if someone will just challenge them to be better. Your voice matters. Your courage matters. You matter. Now go prove it. Because staying silent after hearing this story? That's a choice too. And you'll have to live with that choice every single day. Don't let that be your story. Let Zara's courage inspire your own. Let her stand become the beginning of yours. The moment is coming. Be ready.